Usually when we talk about a scientific cold case, you probably picture like a dusty cardboard box.
Right. Or maybe a faded photograph or a tiny microscopic trace of DNA in a vial.
Yeah, exactly. Something small, something you can, put under a microscope and definitively say, ah, there's the answer.
Because we absolutely expect clear binary answers from our physical evidence. I mean, the scientific method trains us to look for an A or a B.
But then you encounter a piece of evidence that just completely breaks the rules.
Completely shatters them.
We're talking about a 14-foot, 4-inch by 3-foot, 8-inch linen cloth that has absolutely baffled historians and artists and physicists for, well, over a century now.
It really is the ultimate puzzle.
It is. And today on the deep dive, we are looking at this ultimate scientific cold case, the Shroud of Turin. And look, to figure this out, we aren't looking at old legends or like pop culture assumptions.
No, we really have to stick to the actual source material for this one.
Right. We are cracking open the actual data. We've got historical archives from the British Society for the Turin Shroud, modern nuclear engineering models by researcher Bob Rucker, and the literal darkroom logs of Barry Schwartz, who was the documenting photographer for the 1978 Shroud of Turin research project.
And the mission here is really just to strip away the centuries of myth. We want to look strictly at what modern science, physical evidence, and statistical analysis actually tell us about this cloth.
So to set the scene for you, the listener, if you were to stand in front of this cloth today, what exactly are you seeing?
Well, the very first things pulling your eye are the massive areas of damage.
It's pretty banged up.
Very banged up. You'd see these two long, really prominent scorch marks and like 16 triangular patches.
Right, the battle stars. Yeah.
Exactly, from a chapel fire in 1532 in Chambéry, France. And you'd also notice these large diamond-shaped water stains.
Because they threw water on the silver box it was kept in.
Yeah.
To stop it from melting.
Yeah, desperate times. They were just trying to save it from the flames. But if you force your eyes to look past all those dramatic burn marks into the empty space in the middle,
That's where the actual mystery lives.
that's it. There are these incredibly faint straw-colored impressions. It's the front and back image of a naked, crucified man lying head to head.
And for centuries, that faint image was that was the whole story, right?
Right, just a hard-to-read sepia-tone stain on some old fabric. I mean, a viewer had to stand several feet back just to even make out the facial features.
So it wasn't exactly like high definition.
Not at all. And the real scientific investigation, the one we're diving into, it didn't start with a microscope or, a chemical swab.
It started with a camera.
The entire paradigm shifted because of a camera.
Right. So in 1898, the shroud was photographed for the very first time by this amateur photographer named Secondo Pia. And back then, taking a photo wasn't just a quick click on a phone.
No, it was an ordeal.
Yeah, hauling around massive glass plates, dealing with explosive magnesium flashes, spending hours in a dark room.
So Pia takes this photograph and he
Yeah.
goes into his darkroom and he drops the massive glass plate into the developing chemicals.
Right.
Now, any photographer expects to see a standard negative where the light areas are dark and the dark areas are light.
So he was probably anticipating a blurry, inverted, totally useless version of that faint stain.
Exactly. But as the image developed in the chemical bath, he realized the faint marks on the cloth were themselves perfectly functioning as a photographic negative.
Which is wild, meaning his photographic negative plate inverted the image back into a positive.
Yes. He was suddenly staring at a striking, anatomically accurate, high-resolution, positive image of a man's face looking right back at him in the darkroom.
Just imagine that moment.
I know, it gives you chills. And the shockwaves from that darkroom hit the scientific community almost instantly, because it proved that whatever created the image on the cloth wasn't just a simple stain or like a crude medieval painting.
Right, because it possessed the precise light and dark reversal of a photograph.
Somehow encoded into linen centuries before the concept of photography was even invented.
Which alone is just mind-blowing. But the camera wasn't actually done breaking our understanding of this cloth, was it?
Not even close. Fast forward to 1976. You've got physicists John Jackson and Eric Jumper, along with a researcher named Bill Modern.
Okay.
They decide to put a photograph of the shroud into a machine called a VP8 image analyzer.
And this is a massive turning point in the source material we looked at. What exactly is a VP8?
Well, it was a highly specialized piece of equipment used primarily by NASA and the military.
Wow.
Yeah, to analyze X-rays and satellite imagery. What it does is convert the two-dimensional shading of an image like the lightness and darkness into vertical relief.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Wait, I'm trying to picture this mechanism. If I take a normal 2D photograph of my face, say I'm standing outside and the sun is shining really brightly on the left side of my nose, and I put my photo into that VP8 machine, the computer is going to read that bright sunlight as closer to the camera.
Yes.
Exactly, even if it's just a flat cheek. And the shadow on the other side of my face would be read as further away or deeper. So my face would come out looking completely deformed, like melted plastic.
Your face would look entirely distorted, yeah.
Yeah.
Because a normal photograph relies on lighting direction.
Right.
A painter relies on shading. Neither one encodes actual physical distance. But when those physicists put the photograph of the shroud into the VP8,
In Discord.
it produced an accurate, perfectly contoured, three-dimensional representation of a human body.
That is just, I know.
The facial features, the arms, the chest, everything was contoured correctly based on its actual physical distance from the cloth during the time the image was formed.
Which is mind-bending. It's like finding a modern 3D printer file perfectly encoded inside a medieval tapestry.
It really is.
Like, how could any forger, let alone an artist working before the year 1898, possibly paint a photographic negative that also perfectly encodes three-dimensional topographical data?
They couldn't. I mean, Peter Schumacher, the engineer who literally installed the VP8 system and trained those physicists, he was utterly astonished.
I bet.
He went on record stating he had never seen anything like it in all his years of image analysis. He said only the Shroud of Turin had ever produced a medically accurate result from a VP8 isometric projection study.
Wow.
And never before and never since.
I mean, look, you don't just find pristine 3D data hidden in ancient linen and walk away. That incredible discovery had to be the direct catalyst for what happened next.
Oh, absolutely. They knew they had to get their hands on the physical cloth.
Right, which led to the formation of the 1978 Shroud of Turin Research Project.
Widely known as STIRT.
Poo, exactly. And they assembled this multidisciplinary team of 26 American scientists. We're talking physicists, chemists, optical experts.
Working alongside researchers from Los Alamos National Scientific Laboratories and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Heavy hitters.
Yes, serious scientists.
Yeah.
And they managed to secure permission from the King of Italy, who owned the relic at the time, for 120 hours of round-the-clock, continuous, non-destructive testing in October of 1978.
It was a massive logistical undertaking.
It really was. And they almost didn't make it to the cloth at all. This is actually one of my favorite behind-the-scenes stories from the documentation.
Oh, the customs incident.
Yes. So Stuart IP ships 80 crates of custom-built, highly sensitive scientific equipment over to Italy. But the entire shipment gets seized by Italian customs right at the border.
Right.
And why? Because a technician stuck a standard bright yellow radiation warning sticker on the crate containing the portable X-ray machine.
Which is, standard protocol for the scientists.
Totally normal.
But to the customs agents, it looked like a major nuclear hazard was being smuggled into the country.
Right. So all 80 crates are stuck in quarantine. The clock is ticking on their 120-hour window. The scientists are sweating through these endless, stressful meetings.
Manic mode.
Total panic. Finally, Father Rinaldi of the Holy Shroud Guild, who is helping coordinate the expedition, he just marches into the customs office.
I love this part.
He tells the official in charge that an international incident is about to happen, and he wants to make sure this specific official gets all the credit for causing it.
A very persuasive opening negotiation tactic.
Right. Then he casually slides over 100,000 lira bribe, and poof, the equipment is magically released.
Bureaucracy at its finest.
So the team gets into the cathedral, they set up, and the physical anatomical data they collected over those 120 hours is just staggering.
The medical accuracy is profound, especially when you compare it to art history.
Also,
Well, if this was a medieval forgery, the artist would follow the artistic conventions of the Middle Ages, right?
sure.
And in almost every medieval painting of a crucifixion, the nails are depicted going straight through the center of the palms.
Because that's naturally how we imagine it.
Exactly. But modern medical science and forensic pathology knows that the flesh of the palm cannot support the weight of a human body.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the nail would just tear straight through the flesh and fingers. The shroud, however, shows the nail wounds in the wrists.
In the wrists.
Specifically, a tiny anatomical gap called the space of distot. It's a small opening between the carpal bones. A nail driven through there wouldn't break any bones, but it would lock the body securely to the wood.
Wow. And driving a nail through that specific gap triggers another physiological reaction, doesn't it? Something about the hands.
Yes, it does. If you look at your own hand right now and imagine a significant trauma directly to the center of your wrist,
Okay.
that is exactly where the median nerve runs. When the median nerve is crushed or severed by a nail, the thumb automatically and violently collapses sharply inward against the palm.
Ouch.
Yeah. And on the shroud image, the thumbs are completely hidden. You only see 4 fingers on each hand.
That's incredible.
Right. A medieval artist wouldn't have the anatomical knowledge to paint a missing thumb.
And the forensic details don't stop there. The STIRP team found evidence of rigor mortis in the feet, which were locked in a position suggesting one foot was rotated over the other so the man could push up and down to breathe.
Horrific, but medically consistent.
They mapped over 120 individual scourge marks on the back, and the size and shape of those contusions perfectly match a Roman flagrum.
Which is a specific type of whip with dumbbell-shaped lead weights at the ends.
Even the large wound in the side of the chest is medically precise. It matches the exact dimensions of a Roman thrusting spear.
And more importantly, the fluids flowing from that wound are separated.
Separated.
Yes, the cloth shows both red blood stains and an invisible halo of clear fluid that only fluoresced under ultraviolet light.
Wow.
That clear fluid is a mix of blood plasma and pleural fluid from the lungs. And that specific separation only happens post-mortem. It proves the side wound was inflicted after the heart had completely stopped beating.
Okay, I have to push back here. Because if we know the image is anatomically and medically perfect-like, to a degree a medieval artist couldn't possibly know, what did the STIRP chemists actually find on the cloth? If it's a forgery, did they find medieval paint? Even, like, really clever invisible paint?
What's fascinating here is what they absolutely did not find.
Nothing.
In 1981, after 3 years of processing the data from that 120-hour session, STIRP released their official peer-reviewed conclusion. There were no pigments, no paints, no dyes, no stains.
Nothing at all.
They found 0 brush strokes and, crucially, no evidence of capillarity.
Okay, remind me, capillarity is...
Capillarity is what happens when liquid soaks into a thread, like dropping water on a paper towel.
Right, it spreads out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But whatever made this image was entirely dry.
Okay, so no paint, no liquid, no dye. What actually is the image?
The image is strictly the result of a superficial discoloration of the linen fibers themselves.
Okay, we need to pivot and look at this on a microscopic level. Because if STIRP proved it wasn't painted on, what exactly colored the cloth and how did it happen?
Let's zoom way, way in.
Yeah.
A single linen thread on the shroud is incredibly fine, about 0.25 millimeters thick, and it contains roughly 100 microscopic fibers spun together.
Okay.
The STIRP team found that only the very top 1 or 2 layers of fibers on a thread are discolored. The other 98 or 99 fibers underneath are perfectly pristine and white.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting to me. Not only is it just the top couple of fibers, but the discoloration doesn't even go all the way through those individual microscopic fibers.
Right, it's insanely thin. The discoloration penetrates just 2 micrometers deep. That is essentially just the primary cell wall of the microscopic fiber.
Right.
The inside of that single fiber is completely colorless.
So if you're listening and trying to picture this at home, imagine roasting a marshmallow.
Good analogy.
But instead of the heat cooking the inside and melting the whole thing into a gooey mess, you somehow apply an energy source so briefly and so perfectly that you lightly toast only the absolute, uttermost microscopic skin of the marshmallow.
Leaving the entire inside completely raw and cold.
Exactly.
That is the perfect analogy for the chemistry happening here. The STIRP team defined this discoloration as a dehydration-oxidation process.
Okay.
Essentially, the single electron bonds of the carbon atoms in the cellulose of the linen were stripped of moisture and changed into double bonds.
And that changes the color.
Yes, that altered how those specific atoms reflect ambient light, creating that straw yellow color we see.
And there's one more microscopic detail that completely flips the timeline of how this image was made. Right. It involves the blood stains.
Right. When they looked under the microscope, they found there's absolutely no image discoloration underneath the blood.
Which means the blood had to be there
The
first.
blood transferred to the cloth, and then later, whatever formed the image happened around it.
So the blood acted as a physical shield.
Exactly. Protecting the linen fibers underneath it from being oxidized. Think about what that means for a potential forgery.
It's impossible.
A forger wouldn't just have to apply actual medically accurate human blood to a blank cloth. They would then have to perfectly encode a 3D photographic negative around that blood without disturbing or painting over a single drop.
I mean, people have desperately tried to explain this through natural earthly means, right?
Wow. Of course.
Like Walter Macrone, a famous microscopist, he claimed he found iron oxide and declared it was just tempera paint.
He did. But Stirp proved the iron oxide Macron found was just trace material from the flax retting process.
The retting process.
Yeah, it's the ancient method of soaking flax plants in water to separate the fibers to make the linen.
Ah,
Plus, there was no protein binder present, which is absolutely required for tempera paint to stick.
right. And later, Stirp chemist Ray Rogers proposed the Maillard reaction, which is a natural chemical process where decomposition vapors from a body react with starches left on the cloth.
Like how a bread crust magically browns in the oven from the heat and gases.
Right.
But while gas diffusion can indeed discolor linen, gases scatter. They diffuse in all directions.
They don't travel in straight lines.
Exactly. A gas cloud completely fails to explain the incredibly high-resolution sharpness and the precise 3D vertical alignment of the shroud image. Gases do not travel in straight, vertically collimated lines.
So if the image isn't painted on, and it isn't a natural gas reaction because gases scatter and blur, what on earth travels in perfectly straight lines to create a high-res 3D map?
Well, the physicists realized there was really only one option left to explain this extreme superficiality in 3D encoding.
Radiation.
Radiation.
But the moment we talk about radiation, we collide head-on with the elephant in the room, the famous 1988 radiocarbon dating.
Yes, and this is where the physics gets incredibly intense. Let's look at the radiation experiments first. Italian physicist Paolo di Lazzaro used state-of-the-art excimer lasers, which shoot incredibly short bursts of ultraviolet light to try and color raw linen.
He was trying to replicate that 2-micrometer marshmallow toast we talked about.
Exactly. And on a microscopic scale, he succeeded. He replicated that exact superficial discoloration on a tiny sliver of cloth.
Okay.
But to replicate that effect across an entire human figure, de Lazzaro calculated it would require billions of watts.
The billions.
That is more ultraviolet power than is generated by all the UV light sources available on Earth today, delivered in less than 1/40 billionth of a second.
That energy required is just staggering. But wait, in 1988, labs in Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona carbon-dated a piece cut from the corner of the shroud.
They did.
And they definitively said it dated to somewhere between 1260 and 1390 AD. For decades, that was the end of the conversation. The headline was, "It's a medieval fake."
It was the ultimate mic drop for a lot of people, but according to the deep statistical research by nuclear engineer Bob Rucker, there's a massive mathematical flaw in that 1988 data.
What kind of flaw?
When you plot the dates from those different subsamples against exactly where they were cut from the cloth, you don't get a flat line at the same age. You get a linear slope.
A slope, meaning the dates change depending on where the scissors cut.
The dates change by roughly 36 years for every centimeter you move across the sample piece.
Wow.
Statistically, a slope like that proves the samples had a systematic error. They were not homogeneous. The piece they cut was absolutely not representative of the rest of the cloth.
Okay, I'm trying to piece this together. If we connect this back to the radiation theory, Bob Rucker proposes the neutron absorption hypothesis.
Yes.
He suggests the image was created by an intense burst of vertically collimated radiation. And vertically collimated, meaning the energy didn't just explode outward in all directions like a bomb, but traveled strictly straight up and straight down.
Almost like lasers from a barcode scanner reading the 3D shape of the body.
Right, and that is the exact geometry required to create the VP8 3D data.
Precisely. Now, if that burst of radiation included neutrons, perhaps from the fission of trace amounts of deuterium, which is a heavy isotope of hydrogen naturally found in the human body,
Right.
those neutrons would shoot out and interact with the trace amounts of nitrogen in the linen.
And when a neutron hits nitrogen-14?
It creates a proton and carbon-14.
No.
Rocker ran extensive MCNP computer calculations. MCNP stands for Monte Carlo N particle,
Okay.
which is the exact same rigorous software used by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to design nuclear reactors.
So this is serious science.
Very serious. He found that if just 2 × 10 to the 18th power neutrons were emitted from the body.
Which sounds like a massive number, but is actually a tiny, tiny fraction of the total atoms in a human body.
Exactly. That specific amount of new carbon-14 would shift the apparent age of the cloth from 33 AD exactly to the 1260-1390 AD range found in the 1988 test.
And that explains the slope. If the body itself is the source of the radiation, the areas of the cloth closer to the center of the body would absorb way more neutrons than the outer corners.
Exactly.
So a piece cut from the edge would have a completely different ratio of new carbon-14 than a piece cut near the chest.
The spatial geometry perfectly aligns with the error found in the 1988 data. And Rucker's theory addresses one more impossible puzzle.
The blood.
The blood. We established the blood dried on the body, then somehow got perfectly transferred to the cloth before the image formed.
But dried blood doesn't soak into linen, it just flakes off.
Right.
So how did it get embedded into the fibers so perfectly?
Rucker suggests that this same intense burst of particle radiation generated radiation pressure. Basically, the radiation transferred massive physical momentum to the dried blood, literally thrusting it off the body and embedding it into the cloth in anatomically perfect placement.
An instant before the image was scorched into the fibers.
Yes.
Okay, I have to step in here. I really have to push back on this.
Go for it.
We are talking about a dead body suddenly emitting billions of watts of UV light, or vertically collimated proton radiation, or the nuclear fission of deuterium.
It's extreme, yes.
Science needs a mechanism. It needs to be repeatable. Isn't proposing an unprecedented physics-defying burst of radiation just a highly technical, scientific-sounding way of saying it's a miracle? Aren't we leaving the scientific method completely behind?
Well, this raises an important question, and honestly, it is the ultimate paradox of this source material.
Right.
Whether it's Rucker's proton radiation, John Jackson's UV fall-through hypothesis, or Giulio Fanti's theory of a high-intensity electrical discharge like the holy fire, they all reverse engineer the physical evidence flawlessly.
What?
But you are absolutely right. They all rely on an initiating event, like a resurrection that sits entirely outside the current realm of physics.
Right, because science can meticulously reverse engineer the evidence on the cloth. We can look at the burn marks and say, this specific type of laser energy would cause this specific 2-micrometer oxidation.
Yes, we can measure the aftermath.
But science cannot test a miracle in a lab. The scientific method breaks down when the initiating cause is, by definition, supernatural or currently unexplainable by the laws of nature.
That is the immovable wall the researchers hit. I mean, the physical reality of the object sitting in Turin right now demands an explanation that our current understanding of physics simply cannot provide.
So you, the listener, what does this all mean for you?
It's a lot to process.
It is. We have an ancient linen cloth that contains perfectly encoded 3D negative topographical data. We have fibers that are dehydrated and oxidized to a microscopic depth of 2 micrometers, an effect that modern lasers struggle to replicate.
We have anatomically perfect bloodstains that acted as a physical shield.
Right, protecting the linen underneath from whatever impossible energy formed the image. And we have a 1988 carbon date that statistical geometry shows is skewed, potentially by the very burst of nuclear energy that might have created the image in the first place.
Look, whether you view the Shroud of Turin as an incredibly elaborate, scientifically brilliant medieval forgery that we still can't figure out, or you view it as the genuine burial cloth of Jesus Christ, it stands completely alone.
It really does.
It is the ultimate multidisciplinary puzzle.
Yeah.
It is the one place where history, quantum physics, photography, anatomy, and faith all collide in exactly the same space.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it really forces you to reconsider what we think we know about the limits of physical matter.
Absolutely. And here's a final thought for you to mull over.
Okay.
Let's say 100 years from now, human technology advances to the point where we finally build a machine capable of reproducing an exact microscopic replica of the Shroud of Turin using directed high-intensity particle radiation.
Okay, wow.
Does that finally prove it was just a forgery made by some unfathomably advanced lost method? Or does it simply prove exactly how unimaginably powerful the original event really was?
You know, usually when we talk about a scientific cold case, you picture a dusty cardboard box. But when the evidence is a 14-foot linen cloth that defines every law of physics we throw at it, you have to wonder if the case is cold because we lack the clues, or because we simply don't have the science to understand the answer yet.